In 1492, while the world remembers Columbus sailing to the New World, in Africa, mighty empires were rising, warriors were marching, kings were planning, and cities were shining with gold, culture, and wisdom. This is not the Africa you've been told about in school. This is the Africa that ruled its own world. 1492 is a very important year in world history. That was the year Christopher Columbus sailed from Europe and arrived in the Americas. Many people know about that story. But what about Africans? What were African people doing in that same year? The truth is, Africa was full of life. Powerful kingdoms ruled the land. People farmed, traded, prayed, and built amazing things. There was learning, music, culture, war, peace, and everything in between. Let's take a journey through the African continent in 1492 and see what life was really like. In 1492, West Africa was one of the richest and most powerful parts of the world. Here, great empires controlled trade routes, gold mines, and big cities. 1. The Songhai Empire. In 1492, Askia the Great had not yet taken the throne, but the Songhai Empire was already a powerful kingdom under Sunny Ali, who had died a few years earlier in 1492. Sunny Ali had led many military campaigns. He conquered cities like Timbuktu and Jen, which were centers of learning and religion. Timbuktu had large libraries and universities. People came from all over Africa and even from the Middle East to learn. The scholars wrote books in Arabic about medicine, astronomy, law, and history. The Songhai Empire controlled trade in gold, salt, ivory, and slaves. Their army was well organized, and the empire stretched along the Niger River. 2. The Kingdom of Benin. Further south, in what is today Nigeria, the Benin Kingdom was shining. The Oba of Benin was a powerful king who lived in a large palace decorated with brass plaques and sculptures. Benin City was well organized with wide streets and high walls. European visitors who came later were shocked at how clean and advanced the city was. The kingdom had skilled bronze artists who created famous Benin bronzes. They traded with other African kingdoms and were soon to start contact with the Portuguese. 3. The Mali Empire. Though no longer at its peak, the Mali Empire, which had once been ruled by the great Mansa Musa, still existed. Its influence was fading by 1492, but the culture and wealth it brought to West Africa still remained. In North Africa, great Islamic cities thrived. 1. The Kingdom of Morocco. In Morocco, the Wattasid dynasty was in power. Morocco was a center of trade, learning, and religion. People traveled through the Sahara Desert on camels to reach Morocco from the south. Cities like Fez and Marrakesh were famous for their schools, called madrasas, libraries, and beautiful buildings. 2. Egypt under the Mamluks. In 1492, Egypt was ruled by the Mamluk Sultanate. Egypt was one of the most important parts of the Islamic world. Cairo, the capital, had many mosques, markets, and universities. The Mamluks controlled trade routes between Africa, Europe, and Asia. They were strong warriors, but their rule would soon be challenged by the growing power of the Ottoman Empire. In East Africa, many cities along the coast of the Indian Ocean were rich and powerful. These cities formed the Swahili Coast, and they traded with Arabia, Persia, India, and even China. 1. City-states like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Zanzibar. These were not big empires but independent city-states. They were ruled by local kings or sultans. They spoke Swahili, a mix of Bantu and Arabic. These cities became rich by trading ivory, gold, spices, and slaves. Their buildings were made of stone and coral, and they had mosques with beautiful designs. 2. Ethiopia, the Christian Empire. Inland, Ethiopia was a strong Christian kingdom ruled by the Solomonic dynasty. They believed their kings were descendants of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. In 1492, Ethiopia was surrounded by Muslim kingdoms and was sometimes at war, but it managed to survive and protect its religion and traditions. Ethiopians had written languages like Guizi, and they built amazing rock churches in places like Lalibela. In the middle of the continent, great kingdoms also existed. 1. The Kingdom of Congo. The Congo Kingdom was a powerful Central African state. Its capital, Mbanza Congo, was organized with roads and governance systems. In 1491, just 1 year before 1492, the Congo king Nzinga Nkuwu welcomed the Portuguese and even converted to Christianity, taking the name João I. This was one of the first African rulers to become Christian. The Congo Kingdom would later face many challenges from the Portuguese, but in 1492, it was strong and full of promise. 2. Luba and Lunda Kingdoms. Further east in Central Africa, other powerful kingdoms like Luba and Lunda were developing. These kingdoms had systems of government, sacred kingship, and controlled trade in iron, copper, and salt. In southern Africa, most societies were still based on small kingdoms and clans. 1. The Kingdom of Mutapa, Monomotapa. This kingdom was located in what is now Zimbabwe and Mozambique. It grew from the earlier Great Zimbabwe civilization, famous for its stone buildings and walls. By 1492, the Mutapa kingdom was trading gold and ivory with Swahili merchants on the coast. The Portuguese would soon arrive and try to control that trade. 2. Zulu, Xhosa, and other Bantu societies. Other groups like the Zulu, Xhosa, and Sotho lived in communities based on cattle, farming, and respect for elders. They had chiefs, traditions, and strong cultural systems. The large Zulu kingdom would only rise in the 1800s under Shaka Zulu, but in 1492, these societies were already strong in their ways of life. Religion in Africa in 1492. Religion was very important across Africa. Islam was strong in North, West, and parts of East Africa. Christianity was deeply rooted in Ethiopia. African traditional religions were practiced across the continent. These involved respect for ancestors, belief in spirits, and connection to nature. People often mixed different religious beliefs. For example, many West Africans were Muslims but still respected traditional ceremonies. Trade and economy. Africa in 1492 was full of trade. Salt came from the Sahara. The gold came from Ghana and Mali. Ivory, spices, and slaves moved along the East African coast. Cloth, pottery, and beads were exchanged in local markets. Africa was not isolated. It was connected to Europe, Asia, and the Middle East through trade routes. Learning and culture. Many Africans could read and write, especially in Islamic areas where Arabic was used. Timbuktu was famous for its books and scholars. In Ethiopia, Christian monks copied texts in Guizi. Oral traditions were also strong. History, laws, and stories were passed down through griots, elders, and storytellers. Music, dance, art, and storytelling were a big part of daily life. War and politics. Like every other part of the world, there was war in Africa in 1492. Empires fought to gain land. Some kings raided others to get slaves or wealth. Others made peace through marriage or agreements. But Africa also had strong political systems. Some areas had kings and queens, while others had councils or age-grade systems. Why this history matters. In school, Africa in 1492 is often ignored or shown as poor and backward. But this is not true. Before colonialism, before the slave trade, Africa had kingdoms, trade, religion, learning, and power. By knowing this, we can change the story. We can show the world that Africa was never silent, it was always part of global history. So, the next time someone says, nothing was happening in Africa during the time of Columbus, tell them the truth. Empires ruled the land. Cities sparkled with knowledge. And Africa was already writing its own story. Let's keep telling it, one video at a time.